now let's talk through this really, really wide range of job role transitions. And there are dozens of different categories of job role transitions. Each of them have to be managed separately. So how do you start to attack this?
Well, you know me, right? I like the one that has the little white star and the little green box under the umbrella and the lounge chair, because I'm all about the start at the end, right? Every project that we build, all of that, we always look at what's the end project. We don't go and dig a hole if we don't know where that hole's supposed to go or what we're supposed to be aiming toward. So I look at the, kind of that retirement masterpiece side where if this is where I want to go and I've given some thought to where I want to go, I'm going to start from there, kind of do the pull plan backwards and look at what are some of the roles that I want and how do I transition through those roles? What are the ones that are going to get me to where I want to go? I love the fact that we have, where we're changing companies and those companies can be different sizes. We might be changing industries. Um, all of that has to do with the role transitions, in your mind and where you want to be in that retirement masterpiece. If you're going to change industries, might be a similar role, but an entirely different industry, which is still a transition. It might be in a bigger company going from small to large or large to small, but it's still like we start this whole thing with the floors and ceilings, right? Your floors and ceilings are different when you go from small to big or big to small, but they're all transitions. You just need to look at them in your own career, right? In your own life, that whole career plus life is, for me, where is that going to take you into that perfect retirement, right? How do you get to sit under the umbrella or whatever, scuba dive and off of Cancun or whatever it is you want to do when you're going to that next stage, and how do you get there and how do you manage all of those? So, David, I know you see it all the time, big to small and changing industries, and I'll let you talk about that messiness of the pyramid on the left-hand side of the slide.
Well,
But there's a lot that goes on here, right?
right. Yeah, I know there's a lot. And I mean, even the company size, like you and I talked, before, I think, you started your career with one of the largest contractors
Mhm.
in the world. And I started my career with one of the, say, million single person contractors in the United States. And those are just dramatically different things. So all of, all of your skills would be totally not helpful for Wayne Shaughnessy, in running his little one man operation there. Oh, you
Right.
were regional business director for Kiewit West. Great, great, good for you. So you doesn't mean you have no value add, but boy, there is a learning curve and a transition,
Mhm.
when it comes to doing that, and there has to be a lot that goes along with that. Same with moving up size, right? Same with going from a contractor that's maybe a stage, 3 that's got 50 employees, and a person's a really good project manager there, and they move over to a very large company.
Right.
It feels very, very different for them. The accountabilities are much higher. The processes are much tighter. The scope is narrower. So it's a very interesting, role transition in either direction. So that's a challenge. Yeah, moving up through the organization and moving around is very, very different. Moving from the field to the office is a transition. Moving from project management to estimating, even if it's same level of role, that's a versatility move that is fantastic. It may be part of an overall career progression. It may be just part of getting somebody into the right role. There's similar skill sets between a project manager and an estimator. However, there's slightly different personality trait differences that can go lead a lot to enjoyment and everything. So it may be a move from that standpoint. So yeah, there's a lot of different moves, and it. I don't think we touch on all of them here, but I do think it's important to understand that each one of these types of moves has a very different dynamic to it, and then you have then the dynamics of the individual person, which we're all different there too, right? And I think the last one that we want to talk through is probably I'm in the same role, but the conditions are different, right? So
Right.
And that might be that I founded the company and I moved through stage one, I moved through stage two, and now I'm at stage three. My leadership has to, my everything about my leadership style, how I allocate my time, all of those things has to be dramatically different. Even though I'm still the same person, I'm the president of the organization. And if I'm still trying to run the business, today's stage of growth, like I successfully navigated through yesterday's
Right.
stage of growth, it just won't work. It'll create a lot of stress on me. It'll create underperformance in the organization, and it'll create stress on the team. The market conditions can be very, very different. A leading leading any company, a contractor, any type of company through massive growth, or a really rapidly growing industry, is very different than leading through, say, that bubble. Now that bubble burst,
Mhm.
either that bubble's leveled out and we've got to maintain steady state. That's a different type of leader. That bubble burst and you're trying to catch a falling chainsaw and look for something else to hang on to. That's a different type of leader. It just requires a different focus. Maybe the same person, but it requires a very different focus. And you've brought this up before, just because of your experience. But geography, apparently, you can't take a New Yorker and move them straight on out to
Yeah,
to
well,
Hawaii.
yeah, well, and yeah, that's definitely a thing, right? It's the not just the same role that the person's in, but it's the geography that you're in. It's the culture that you're working in, inside that geography. And yeah, in my experience, I was tasked with going over to Hawaii and finding out, hey, what is going on here? We're having some complaints, really some people problems over here. What's happening? And what we were finding out is that we were going and grabbing people from certainly East Coast and West Coast and picking them up and dropping them off on a job, on the islands. Same kind of job, same, basic crew structure and crew size and building same type of work.
Right,
But the manager had such a different mode of work based on the geography and the culture of that piece of the organization they were working at on the East Coast or West Coast. It was really causing problems in Hawaii. And we did find out that you kind of have to migrate people to the center of the US, then you can take them out. But yeah, just dropping, one extreme social culture to another it can really be it can feel disruptive, even though it's a job you know how to do, it's a job you've done, it's a job you're still doing, but it's still a transition of a role because you're working with different people in a literal different environment. Now, how do you manage that? So, things to note that it's not just all plug and play.
yeah, wow. So there's a lot here, right? And then there's what, leaving. Yeah, well, let's talk about joining a company. There's two different, probably levels you're joining a company at. There's joining a company in kind of the entry level couple role, layers of the organization. That's one transition. Very different transition than to bring people in. And we see those transitions, especially coming on sometimes with succession or with growth, and you're bringing somebody in at these highest levels in the company. That's a whole different problem to go work through, because you really have to get the cultural integration right. You have to spend a lot of time with their teams and helping get them acclimated. Yeah, that one's difficult, especially if the culture was always no. Everybody that's a vice president in this company came up through the ranks of this
Right.
company, and now you're looking at bringing somebody in from the outside because you need a specialized level of expertise. Maybe it's in manufacturing and fabrication. Maybe it's in risk management, and yeah, that can be a challenge.
Yeah, you can,
And
and it's funny because you can bring high expertise people in. It's almost easier in construction to bring in the high expertise people that can come from maybe another industry. Again, through the finance or HR, those types of things, because they're bringing in a specialty that probably that contractor doesn't already have. But part of that role transition then is, hey, you can bring your expertise and you can get right to work, but you have none of the shared language with anybody because you may have come from that other industry, or come from another contractor, and they each call things different, right? And
right,
coming in as kind of that support role makes it a little difficult as well because you're trying to bring in expertise, you're trying to make an immediate impact, and yet there's this whole thing you have to transition through which is, gaining the hearts and minds and trust of everybody around you and having the common language to talk about that.
And that gets into, as you're looking at that, that gets into that onboarding piece of the talent
Yep.
value stream, right? That's where you've got to look at it and say these systems have to look very differently. Bringing me in from the outside is very different than bringing me up or across from within the organization. So
Right.
yeah,
Well, and onboarding, somebody inside an organization for 30 years can still be onboarded into a new role through a transition a half a dozen times, a dozen times, right? Every time they move to a new role, that transition calls for the offboarding of the person, that the job they're taking, and an onboarding into the job that they're moving into. So it's that whole cycle starts over again.
constant feedback.
Yep.
And
Yep.
then we've got the people leave the organization.
Mhm.
Sometimes people leave and it's just they got a great opportunity somewhere else, and there's nothing to do besides say, wow, congratulations. Maybe it was a
Right.
relocation that they had to do just from their own personal family draw or something. And so categorizing those into regrettable or non-regrettable, meaning you're um, happy that they left or you're like, oh, I mean,
Yeah.
and I can be happy for somebody and not happy that they left.
Right.
That's still a regrettable. and then and then a non-regrettable, that those are things to probably look at. If somebody comes in and turns in their resignation and you do a little mini like backflip inside and go, yeah, about time. Quite honestly, you probably should have handled that earlier in your
Right.
evaluation process, because it probably hasn't been good for anybody for the last year or more if that
Right.
happens. And then there's the voluntary or non-voluntary side. Did that person choose to terminate their employment, or did you choose? And I would separate these out from reduction in force type of things, right? There's,
Right.
we are in a labor intensive, most contractors are labor intensive. So there's a big difference between we wrapped up this large job in this city over here that's a couple states away or something, or just wrapped up a large job period and we had a reduction in force. That's very different than we let somebody go because they were underperforming.
Right.
So
Exactly. Exactly.
so any other leadership moves that we need to talk about here in any more detail? We're going to cover this in more detail in the future. Is there anything else for the rest of our discussion today that we need to touch on?
No, probably just the emphasis that all of this is a continuous cycle, right? No matter where you are in any of this, you're going back to the talent value stream and circling through one more time every time somebody moves to a different role. And again, we'll talk about that more as we move forward. And they'll certainly anybody going back to the first of these discussions will see that we've talked about it then too.
So you're saying there's not one checklist I can just run down, get this done, and all set? No.
Well, you could. I mean, we could probably, just print out this slide and put it up on the wall and say, "Hey, this is it. You're good to go." Um, but then, good luck with that, right? That's
Yeah.
just that is not the human nature of things.
I know for me personally that right there is one of the biggest struggles coming from the up through the field. You make a list of things that have to be done, and
Right.
this is all the way up into project management or whatever. You're building a project, so you make a list of the things that have to be done. You prioritize how you're going to do them all, and you just get them done. And we even track things like rework is a really really bad thing in the field, and project management level. So you don't want to have any rework. And yet when it comes to running the business, it seems like you're constantly doing rework, but it's not the same. Every time the cycle is a little bit different.
Right.
So
Right.
you're
Well, and I guess, the difference between developing people and taking them through these role transitions is again, it's either depth in the role or the leadership trajectory that we're helping people to transition from one role to the next. Let's face it, reworks when you're ripping something out that didn't go very well and having to put it back in. Uh, you contractors pour concrete over and over and over and over and over again, and it's not always rework, right? So there's the new
right.
job with the new pouring of the concrete. It really gets to be, is this the regrettable or the non-regrettable when we're talking about
Yeah.
people, right?
That's a good analogy. You're right. It's like building different projects, or about going back in and remodeling a project that you have,
Right.
you built it now, and 5 to 10 years later, the space needs to be remodeled because it's no longer meeting the needs of the project owner that was
Right.
using it. days. So
Yeah.
no, okay, makes sense.